What episode is it?
Episode.
It's been too long.
It's been like a whole episode.
It's been
since
a whole week,
God.
and you missed us so much. This is episode 2.
Welcome to the revolution.
The idea, really quick, behind this series is just talking about how there's so many things in this life,
Right.
in this world, that people look for truth in.
Right.
And the series comes from a story that we will be talking about and have been talking about at youth, where basically Paul is in a culture where people are unfamiliar with who the one true God is. He's walking around the city.
Yep.
He basically sees a statue that has an inscription on it that says, this statue is to an unknown God.
Yeah.
And he utilizes that moment to tell the people in the city, hey, I was walking around your city. I saw this statue said to an unknown God. I'm going to tell you today who that is. And it's brilliant.
Yes. A great sermon illustration.
Yeah.
Like that's how you know Paul was a great preacher, because he saw something
Not
on the
as
spot.
good as Pastor Matt.
I mean,
but
few are. I'm just kidding.
You're like, I can't even say that.
I'll take it. I'll own it. There's very few are as good as me, he says humbly in the podcast.
Just crickets. But it's cool because this is what we believe in the world we live in. People are in pursuit of truth. Right. And by the way, that's how we're wired.
Yeah.
I think it's cool. On the first episode, we talked about value. We talked about pursuing God. Mm-hmm. And as human beings, whether you're in relationship with Jesus or you're not, on this podcast, we are in relationship with Jesus. Yeah. We're following Jesus. But we do believe that everybody is wired to worship and to pursue truth. And so that is the heart behind a series like this. But let's talk about the branding real quick. Dinosaurs. Oh. Well, first of all, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Dude.
I can never remember the names.
Well, you know what? I felt like I was lied to. We grew up in a generation of Jurassic Park, right? The movies, Jurassic Park.
Which are incredible.
Besides the third one.
Fair enough.
And then...
Is there any movie series that have good...
Like all three of them?
You're a movie guy.
I am a movie guy.
Is there any third movies that you would say, this is great? I mean, obviously, Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, third one's good. Too many endings.
What about Toy Story 3?
Oh, dude, I cried at Toy Story 3.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So there are
because okay, so Toy Story 1 came out when I was in 4th grade. Yeah. Then I think, 2 years down the road, Toy Story 2 came out.
I hope somebody gets you in the comment section and is like, I didn't know that you were that old. I'm just kidding.
I receive it. And then it took until I became a dad. And then Toy Story 3 came out. Right? No. Yes, Toy Story 3. No, Toy Story 4 came out. There's 3 is the one with the teddy bear that smelled like strawberries. Yes. Yeah. I was going to say, I cried on the 4th one.
Perfect. No. But you picked the right thing to identify Toy Story 3. Because Toy Story original is like, hey, you got Sid with the skeleton t-shirt.
Yep, it's just crazy. Done deal.
Toy Story 2, Jesse
and Bullseye.
Toy Story 3,
finding a home. Which actually, looking back on it, and I'll get to the dinosaurs, but we're on the Toy Story train.
That was either the worst or best thing that you've ever done, and I'm failing to.
You've seen a lot. When I went back and watched Toy Story 2 with my kids, and the Sarah McLachlan song, with Jesse.
Can you sing a bit?
It hit differently. If I'm being honest, I can't remember off the top of my head, because when I think Sarah McLachlan, I just think Adopt a Puppy commercial, and I can't remember what it is.
All I can think of when I think about Toy Story, all I can think of is You Got a Friend in Me.
Oh, that's a great one.
Which, side note, when I was younger, I thought it was you have a friend in need.
Oh.
And
so you thought it was missional at the very beginning.
Maybe I spent too much time in the church. I thought it was like, you got a friend in need, and I'm like, I'm here for him.
I got you here.
But it's you got a friend in me.
That's what Jesus told me to do, is go seek those that are hungry.
Matt, you have a friend in me. I just want you to know.
Come on. No, you know what? This is a great segue. Why did we do dinosaurs, though? Is because... because, let's be honest, there's nothing better than dino nuggets.
Okay.
And
I'm there with you.
I'm in full understanding that when this branding was made,
Dino Nuggets.
the person had to have been eating Dino Nuggets.
Yeah.
Because you have relative things. Like you have space, you have UFOs.
Yep.
You have
Roman statues.
Which is from the story, right? There's some content, and then dinosaurs.
But have you ever thought about this? Think about this for a second, because you said Dino Nuggets. And
God, how good though are Dino Nuggets?
Yeah. God. It's like every time we say it, we have to acknowledge their greatness. Dino Nuggets.
They're good without ketchup. Any sauce they can eat on their own.
Yeah. The reason Dino Nuggets are the GOAT of all chicken nuggets is because they're at every store.
Yeah.
So it's like, even if you're not someone that shops at Target, it's like, and you're like, I'm an Aldi person, they got Dino Nuggets. So it's like, if Dino Nuggets are everywhere, then it means that they're supreme for sure.
Absolutely.
But I think it's interesting. You said we got Dino Nuggets, and space is a little bit this way too. Yeah. But it's like, why and it's funny. It's actually ironic because we use them both in our branding.
Right.
But I'm like, why are they used so widely in branding when they're two things that nobody knows anything about? And maybe that's just it. Like,
interesting.
Like, we've never seen dinosaurs. Yep. Also.
Yep.
I've never been to space.
Well, and even too, what I was going back to. Well, I'm spaced out a lot.
Okay.
But I was going back to Jurassic Park. Like, when you asked what my favorite dinosaur was, it was a velociraptor.
Oh, that's iconic.
Right, because, Jurassic Park 1, like, they're nuts.
Oh, yeah.
By the new age Jurassic Park, they're like your best friend because you train them.
Yeah.
But velociraptors are sweet. But then I found out that they're like tiny birds. In reality.
In real history.
Yeah, in real history, they're like little birds that have wings. And I'm like, what a letdown.
Yeah.
And
then you said you didn't like the third movie. Well, and then they become like really genetically modified.
Yeah, and like the new one with Chris Pratt and all that. Yeah,
Chris Pratt. Let's talk like Chris Pratt. He's the best part of that movie. He's the best part of any movie.
Except for was it Mosasaurus that comes out of nowhere and just swallows up? That was awesome.
But we love Chris Pratt.
We do.
Anyways.
But and I think it's cool because they're two unknown things. And honestly, too, what we're coming to find out, we're digging up bones and we're finding and we're putting what we think, because again, it's not like, oh, well, I had a dream and this is what a Stegosaurus
you're
looked
saying
like.
That's how, by the way, I'm not saying this is me.
We're not against
I'm not saying this is me, but there are people that believe, and people in this generation that are like, I'm having conversations with students that are saying, hey, I don't actually believe that dinosaurs existed. I'm just throwing that out there. And it's worth just throwing it out, let it sit.
Yeah, just let it.
People can argue and debate all you want.
In the comments.
Yeah.
Are you a dinosaur believer or not? We just want to know.
Because people say, you said, hey, we're looking at bones, we're uncovering, and then piecing together what these dinosaurs are. People are like, yeah, but the most, the percentage of those, of complete fossils of those dinosaurs is a low percentage. They're saying, I don't even know if I believe in them. I'm just saying.
I mean, it's interesting. Crazy. Here's one thing that I've come to realize. I don't care at the end of the day. And so that's what's great. Someone told me one time, I have a superpower of not caring, but it can also be my greatest weakness.
Yeah.
And so when someone's trying to pressure me of believing what they're saying, I'll just be like, I'm okay. It's cool that but
you
whatever.
are. That's one thing I love about you. You will, you can be immovable.
Yes.
People are like, Matt, you need to do this. And you're like, if you didn't want to, you're like,
no,
I'm
good.
And honestly, we need more people in the world like that.
Yeah.
But the branding for the series feels random, but here's why. To answer the question, here's why: dinosaurs, outer space, all this stuff. Those things signify things that people search for truth in. Not that people search for truth in dinosaurs or in aliens or UFOs, but those things tell in most people's minds, those automatically tell a story. This is what creation looked like. Mm-hmm. This is what is out there in the vast expanse of space.
Right.
And so this story is so cool about Paul and the sermon to an unknown God, which he's saying is one true God, because he is capitalizing on something that culture believed.
Right.
And he's essentially hijacking it for the sake
100%.
Of the gospel.
Well, and I think even too, I bet you if I were Paul, I would look at that and just be so flabbergasted about the fact that they created a statue to something that's unknown. I'm
just think about that.
What are you even doing? come on, guys. Like that. So for me, I'm thinking of like, have you seen the movie Thor Ragnarok?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Oh, dude, the music, the
so
soundtrack of Ragnarok.
It's so good. But the scene where Thor gets put into that prison and just goes into a forever loop.
Oh yeah.
Can you imagine that would be what people do at that time for that religion? Is they would be pursuing. They don't even know what they're pursuing.
Right.
Like if I'm in a car and I don't know where I'm going, I get so frustrated because I'm like, I need to know where I'm going. I don't even care why I'm going. I just need to know where I'm going.
Yeah.
Like
100%.
And so to the fact that someone probably spent a stupid amount of time created a statue and then writing to an unknown God. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's I love that you said that because as absurd as it sounds, and that's so true about the story. Like they have so many statues that there's one that has this inscription. Let's just add one more to an unknown God.
Yeah. Just in case. We're gonna shotgun shoot this thing and we're gonna be like, just in case we missed one.
Right. But it's fun. It's funny. So like we laugh about that, but even in this series, that's part of what we're talking about. Is I really think the state of the world is that more people the same people that would say that's crazy. Like who would do that?
Right.
If we're being honest,
we do it all the time.
We do that all the time. And so as we are talking about where do people find truth, what is the truth of God? That sounds like a simplistic thing, but in this setting, and even as we've been talking about it in youth, there's more to that. And really, as Christ followers, that one of our main things is like we want to help people discover that the truth of God has been established since the beginning of time.
Right. And isn't it interesting too? And as humanity, we always want what we don't have.
Yeah, that's absolutely
like
true.
Old Testament, they wanted a ruler. Like they wanted a king, right? When they had God.
Right.
Then when God brings them even a person in Jesus, they were not satisfied with the person that God presented because it didn't look the way they did. Then now we're in this era where we wish we had someone physically to look to.
Right.
Like, and I think,
so true.
But that's humanity. We're never satisfied with what we have. And so it's just interesting because, you say that because I'm even thinking today, and I have a lot of kids in my youth ministry that's like, I wish I could see God. Like I want to see
that's something.
Him. Like physically, I want to be there.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that's why, because people that say, hey, it's hard for me to believe in God, but at the same time, I'm willing to believe that humanity was planted here by aliens, or that creation was this way, and it all started from this collision of two molecules. Like, do you think that's one of the big hangups? Is like these are things that we feel like we can see, so it explains.
Yeah, and I think just from conversation, people just believe whatever they want.
Yeah,
and again, with everything that's been happening in our world, like we can throw something out and have no source behind it, and people will start following it. I remember in high school, I'd have to write papers, and what was the one source I could never use? Wikipedia.
But it is reliable.
It is reliable now. Ironically, now that I'm outside of writing papers. But, I couldn't use that source because it wasn't reliable because anyone could edit it at any time.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's what I feel personally, how everyone is looking. Anything that makes sense in their head, they're like, okay, cool. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. And then they'll buy into it. Even just politically, right? We just ended a political, run, and people don't know why they voted the way that they voted sometimes, and no one does the research. They vote on feels. Not everyone. I'm not blanket stating that, but that's what a lot of people have been doing because they don't like one or they don't like the other, rather than researching the candidate and at least the platform that they're in. But I think about when it comes to God, it's like, we want to see, we want to feel, we want to experience. First of all, before I dive into it, can you imagine a hug from God physically?
Yeah. I mean, no. I mean,
I know, but I can imagine it. And I feel like it just, to go back to Toy Story, it would be like strawberries and all of that.
To be honest with you, when you said that, I just thought like, we talk about God's power, and His strength.
He would give you a big squeeze.
Well, yeah. There's someone in my life that every time they hug me, they're like the back cracker. You know, the guy that's like, "Hey, how have you been?"
I only seek that person when I'm stiff, when I'm
so
really
God
sore.
would be that.
But I
it would
also
be like,
think, though, in His attributes, I think He would know when to have a little gentleness into them.
You're like, what? People are listening. What does this have to do with the truth of God?
But, I was in Romans, because talking with Paul, where'd it go? It says here in Romans 1:20, it says, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his invisible qualities,
That's key.
Invisible, right? Yeah. It would be, again, and that points to faith. In Hebrews, faith is the things that we cannot see, but we are assured of.
Exactly.
That's the thing that we have to hold on to. The invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen.
Yes.
Isn't that interesting? And invisible attributes being clearly
seen. That's good.
Being understood that through which has been made so that they are not without excuse.
Right.
It's interesting because right here, and in this section of Paul's letters to the church in Rome, he's saying, and it's like, listen, God's qualities and his attributes are invisible, but you see them, and they are clearly identified if you have the lens. Like you gotta have the lenses 100%. To be able to see them. But if we're allowing unknown God statues and popularity and whatever can be the thing that you put your identity in and your truth into, if you have the lenses of that, you see it. Going back to, we'll believe anything because I'm going to put my lenses in that eyesight so that I can see those things. But if I put my eyesight, we even talked about last week or last episode, if we put our lenses on the Word of God and understand who he is, we will begin to see everything. I had a really cool story.
Yeah, sorry. Good.
A couple weeks ago, I was at the LA Dream Center, and it was amazing being able to partner with that.
Shout out to Global Team LA.
Global Team LA. The Dream Center is incredible. If you ever get a chance to go to LA,
if you haven't gone,
you need to go. It is a life-changing ministry. But I heard a story that Mother Teresa, in her early moments of ministry, she had a financial funding individual came to just check on the ministry. And she was like, the guy was kind of looking at what she was doing. And wasn't really impressed, because maybe he was used to big organizations and all this kind of stuff.
More elaborate, organized,
and so almost like I never would see Mother Teresa as desperate, but almost like a last ditch plea. She was like, hey, I've actually saw Jesus. And he was like, what? You saw Jesus? He goes, yeah, I saw Jesus. I want to show it to you. So she takes him on this elaborate journey in the city and finds this just run down alley. And he's like, Jesus is in here, just a little bit. And then she goes to this corner where this starving, hungry young boy is and goes, there's Jesus. And the dude was like, what? This is the boy. And she goes, when you're serving those who God's called us to do, you're serving Jesus.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it was a lens shift for this individual. To understand that even if I don't have the same race, gender, belief, every person has been created by God.
For sure.
And so we need to have the lenses of this is someone who God died for. This is someone who God loves. And regardless if they have a relationship with God or not, they still are being loved by God. And we need to be able to take the invisible attributes of who God is and bring clarity so that they can see it.
Yeah, that's super good, man. We talk a lot about exactly what you're saying, the invisible, the unseen. And I think that for so many young people, it's interesting that can be a hurdle in their minds, or even people in the world today, as we said, well, that can be a difficult thing because it's not something that I'm physically looking at. But I think about as we go on, and like you said, more people are looking for truth and all these different things. It really, the strength of the unseen, of the invisible qualities of who God is. They'll continue to be the strength of the message that we're trying to present and live out. And, it's cool, in the story that this series is based off of, what I love that he does is Paul doesn't get defeated because this group of people believes in all these other things. Instead, he says, this is a moment for the power of God to show through because it contrasts what they believe in. And I think that's where we are. in what we live in.
And the reality is, not everyone's going to believe it.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That is the saddest reality, is not everyone is going to believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah.
And even
and that might sound intense, but by the way, we've talked about this. Those are the kinds of things we are excited to, which sounds crazy to talk about on this podcast,
right?
Because it's not inspiring to say to a room of people like, "Hey, not everybody will believe this message,"
right?
But that's what the Word of God says.
Yeah, it does, and even too, I thought about this, when Mary was almost prophesied over of who Jesus was,
right.
How many, like you said before, you have 4 kids, 5 kids, 4 kids.
4.
You have 4 now. You have 4 now.
Yeah.
I didn't speak over you, I promise.
Come on, man. Yeah. Everybody keeps...
You have 4 kids. I have 3 kids. I'm going to move on quickly. And when our wives were... when our wives were pregnant, how many people, spoke positively, like, this kid is going to be such a blessing and blah, blah, blah. Like,
I thought you were going to say how many people were like, hey, can I touch the baby?
Yeah, I'd be like, no, get out of here.
Maybe TMI, but that's like... It's one of those things where it's like, you wouldn't believe how many people in the world are like, oh, that seems like a good idea.
Yeah, that's a great...
Like,
hold on, get
Anyways.
off me. If you can't touch me when I'm not pregnant, you can't touch me when I am. That's what I would say. On my belly. Anyways, we move on. I lost my train of thought. Yeah.
No, but you're saying, people before someone's born, people say,
oh yeah, they speak into them.
Yeah.
Right. And so what did that person prophesy over Mary? He's like, hey, man, I'm so happy that you're going to be like, this person's going to divide.
Yeah.
And this person is going to take away mothers and daughters and sons. It's just like, what?
Big contrast.
Yeah,
right.
Giant contrast, right? And even too, we think of that process of like Jesus unifies everyone, which is true, who believe.
Yeah. In truth. Exactly.
Truth. And so when we look at Jesus as the unifying factor, it is true. But you have to get over then your selfish motives and your beliefs, and you have to jump into the Word of God and His beliefs, that is the unifying thing. And if you can't do that, we will be divided. And again, that is something that is being so evident in this time and as a pastor, I know I'm not going to say the word love, even though I just did. I appreciate, because I know who believes and who doesn't. The whole gray line and the whole like halfway in there, as irrelevant as that statement actually is, we can see who believes and who doesn't.
Right.
But what also, as followers of Christ, we cannot be passive in preaching the gospel.
I agree.
And we don't have to be a licensed minister. You don't have to be a youth leader. If you had said yes to Jesus, you need to be passionate about the gospel.
That's it. And I love that you brought that up in this setting, because even as we've been in this series, it's easy for people to read a story like this and be like, sure, to your point, well, Paul had a platform to preach the gospel, or even you and I, like, ultimately we're not just passionate about this because we are pastors, but it's what we do. Right. So people would say, hey, you have an outlet to share the gospel, to articulate what God has done. But one of the things that we're super passionate about is, this topic matters, and it's so critical for this generation, because your life as a whole, this is not just a corny statement. Like, your life is a microphone.
Yes.
The context that you're in and the different arenas of life that you're in, we have to present the truth. And I think it's cool because that's what he does. Like, this is an everyday scenario.
Yep.
And as all these things, like, people have truth in all these different areas of life, we're seeing this in culture today. Yeah. It's like, you got a group of people that would say, hey, we all foundationally believe something different about how the world was created, what eternity looks like, but we can live together and we're unified. Yeah. But here's the truth, and you hit this a moment ago. You're not unified. In fact, that's caused more confusion because we're all aware of, like, we're actually on different pages. But again, that can feel discouraging, but I think it's actually cool because it just shows even more than, as we've been talking about, like, the message of who God is just will shine even brighter. Right. As if it's presented.
Absolutely. And I like that you talked about about the truth of God shining, I even think of John 1:1, right? The whole 1 through 5, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. And when I think of, in my Bible, it says the deity of Jesus, right? Instead of a giant genealogy of what's going on, here's the deity of Jesus. Is that he was at the beginning of creation. Right. He was as a baby, and through the Holy Spirit, he is here now. And what we are called to do, and he even said that in the early stages, you are a light. And you need to shine, right? He also called us salt, not salty. And he's like, this is what you have to do. And so when we look at, I heard this was really cool. You need to be a witness of Jesus, not an advocate of Jesus.
It's good.
Because Jesus has already been the advocate. What do you think of?
Say that.
Think of, Law and Order, TV show, right? And you have the advocate, the lawyer that you pay handsomely for, right? Even if they're a terrible lawyer, you pay a stupid amount of money for. And they're there to advocate for you what you didn't do, and so that you can come out on the other side safe and innocent and all that. A witness is someone who gets brought up from the scene that you're either being accused about or in progress of, and they're asking you questions. Right. They're just asking you, hey, where were you on that day? Hey, did you see this person? They weren't saying, hey, tell me your theological belief of blah, 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 blah. They're sharing your experience. And if there's one thing that people cannot argue, it's your experience. Yeah. They can't argue my testimony. They can't argue my experiences. Exactly. They can't argue these things. All we have to do, and I really hope this put some weight off of people, is we don't have to PR God. We don't have to advocate God.
In fact, please
don't actually. In fact, unless never mind. I wasn't going to go there. But please don't. Just be a witness. Can I get a witness? Right? Come on.
I always love when you sing.
That's the best. But listen, don't advocate. Witness. Be a witness. And witness. Please don't get scared when I say that. Like, I got to go to the street corner and do all this kind of stuff. It's telling people what God has done in your life.
Where you're at.
100%. Right? Yeah. It's your testimony. And Revelation 12 talks about, we will overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your testimony. So when you be a witness to people, you are sharing who you were before Jesus. And because of only Jesus, this is where I'm at now. And this is a challenging question that we might have to give a little hook to kind of I want a little bit more, is if you can't think of a difference, then you gotta have a deep thought in your mind being like,
100%,
where am I?
100%, because I think about the story we've been talking about. Like he did exactly what you're saying. Yeah. He said, hey, here's what I'm seeing in this city. Here's what I'm seeing in culture. Right. Here's the truth of who God is. By the way, didn't have to fit in. How does that work its way into all the other gods that you serve? Right. Into how society functions, all of these things. And I think that there is extreme power in what you're saying of hey, we're aware that everybody around us in the world we live in is looking for truth in different things. I had a conversation with a student last week at youth asking questions around this, saying, and by the way, it was actually really cool. This happens more frequently than people realize, and you and I are aware of this because we're pastors in the ministry, but students that come to youth, come to church, that would say, I have zero belief in God. In fact, this student said, I'm an atheist. I don't. And it's interesting too, people can throw that out there and they think there's going to be this pushback of well, you're going to, exactly what you said, you're going to try to advocate, you're going to persuade me. Yep. But our response is, oh, we're glad you're here. And it kind of rattles a bit that's not what I was expecting. Right. Even to the point of saying, hey, I acknowledge we believe different things and still you're in the right place. Right. But then as people ask questions, like you said, not presenting God's truth and saying, so here's why you're wrong. Yeah. But instead being like, well, this is what I believe. Here's why it's true in my life. And I think like you shared about the testimony, the power of the testimony. is so critical.
Yes.
Because again, that's what Paul did here. Is
Right.
he was like, hey, this is who this God is. This is how he's been real in my life.
Right.
And it was in the midst of a group of people in a culture that believed everything opposite of what he was saying.
And here's the thing too, as we're thinking about it, just with salvation and the importance of these things and why our testimony is so important. Last episode, we talked about Galatians 5, and there's a description of fruit of the world, and then there's the fruit of the Spirit.
Living by the Spirit.
That's the two contrasts that they should be. Now, as humans, we will constantly ping pong back and forth because we're not perfect. But if you are someone who has said yes to Christ, you should not be a 2.0 version of who you once were.
That's good.
You need to be a new person of who you are. And that might mean that you need to leave your friends. That might mean you need to leave that relationship. That might mean you need to quit that job. If all of those things will constantly drag you back to try to give you that old identity. I love Proverbs. It says, as a dog returns to its vomit, so does someone return back to sin.
Which is always appealing image.
Oh, well, it's a great, but think about it, because you say that and you're like,
yeah, for sure.
oh my gosh, that is so disgusting.
There's a reason that it's said the way that it's said.
There's a way that it's said, because it draws you in. You're like, no one would ever eat their vomit. But then at the same time, if we go back to our sin, we're doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's true, man.
And so, and that's what's the difference too, because even with Paul's timeline historically, right, everyone was trying to what? Not look poorly to the gods.
Yeah.
And so they were doing offerings. Is that like if someone got sick, be like, oh, you probably, took the gods off, and you probably did this, and you probably did that. And God gave us, and this is what's interesting, God gave us the 10 Commandments, and he gave us the law so that he could give people an understanding of, what not to do. So not everything is a mystery of like, am I going to be in good favor or bad favor with the gods? But I know what I have to do. And so this is what's great, is because now you know what pleases God and what doesn't. And
100%.
And when you can look at that sort of thing, it does take faith, because that's what this isn't what the world's going to want you to do. But it takes faith to know that even if I can't see God,
it's good.
There's truth that is always available.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's one of the powerful things about this topic in this series is, you're going to hear us say it every single episode. It's seriously hitting the value of knowing God's word and letting it change who you are. And as we talk about unknown God, the heart behind it is simply this idea that oftentimes people are not following God, not because they're disinterested, but that God is unknown to them in their world. And that goes back to what we've been just talking about for these moments together, the value of living out your story, your testimony, sharing God's truth as it's been revealed to you. We cannot stress that enough.
Right. And I love too that as we were talking about it, in Romans, in the same context of it, Paul even said that while God was still unknown to us, but how he words it is as even when God was when we were enemies, Christ still died for us.
Yeah.
So even when God was unknown to us, he still sent his son to die on a cross, so that when we do know him, there's no sort of check these 10 boxes in order to have this type of thing. It says that even while we were still sinners, Christ died for us.
Right.
And who does that? He even says that. Paul goes, who does that? People will maybe die for a good person, but no one would die for their enemy.
Yes.
Who does that? God does.
Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Man, hopefully you enjoyed. This is episode 2, but week 1 talking about unknown God. We'll be back with more of this, because there's just so many layers to this topic and idea of finding truth in this world. Once again, you were listening, watching, following the greatest podcast ever.